All right, and welcome back. For those of you that are new to this channel, Voices of Victory, that's my book right there called The Beautiful Flaw. It's all about perfectionism. You can get it on Amazon, which is awesome. Now, let's go ahead and talk about this topic. The topic I'm going to discuss, wait for it, is agreeableness. We're going to talk about balancing agreeableness with boundaries. Now, this happens to a lot of people. I won't even give you the gender statistics as to which one has more agreeableness or not. I'm not even going to venture into that topic. But what we want to understand is that agreeableness is really just a concept of being an agreeable person, as simple as that. But what we have to do is we have to harness its strengths, because people will have the tendency to say, oh, well, that's weakness. Oh, yeah, you can't be that way. You know, that's weakness and this, that, and the other thing. And they'll start projecting their nonsense onto that person. Meanwhile, being agreeable in negotiation can actually be a superpower when it's coupled with, let's say, boundaries, right? That's what it's all about. So agreeableness is a valuable personality trait. I want to get that right out into the open. It's a trait that fosters cooperation, it fosters empathy, and harmonious relationships. So in business, it could actually be functional. There's a big however. When taken to the extreme, it can lead to self-neglect, a neglect of your own needs, difficulty asserting any boundaries using your voice as well, and vulnerability falling into unwanted exploitation of all kinds. So the key is not to eliminate agreeableness, but to balance it with assertiveness, to be assertive. And what we call self-advocacy. That means you become an advocate for you, for yourself. And if you haven't seen my video on self-talk, my live on self-talk, you should go watch that. It was just before this one. This is number 2. Using statements that begin with you is a way for a person who's agreeable to coach themselves with having boundaries. You can say phrases out loud like, you need to have a boundary. You need to draw the line somewhere. And you have to use that external speaking out loud, self-talk. That has to be done, and that has to be used. Hello, just want to say hi to anybody who's just popped in. So we're talking about agreeableness, when people are too agreeable and don't have boundaries. That's what we're discussing on this particular live. So the way to combat being too agreeable, because there are kids that will be agreeable, and it's up to the parents to kind of shape their beliefs and ideologies on how to still be agreeable but still have boundaries, because people will demonize agreeability. Okay, so that's what's pretty wild at the whole concept here. So the key is not to eliminate agreeableness, but to balance it with being assertiveness. So we're going to explore the core aspects of agreeableness and give you some actionable strategies that are going to counteract potential downsides without losing your benefits. So you got to remember, being agreeable, a lot of people like agreeable. You know, it's like when you have a group of friends and everybody needs a ride somewhere, and they'll say, oh, I'll ask so-and-so. He never says no. You know, that last person, they went through everybody on their list, everybody said no, but that last person who's very agreeable says, yeah, sure, I'll do it, you know. I'll go ahead and drive, no problem, right? So they fall into that, right? So let's understand agreeableness in terms of the core definition of it. It is a pro-social behavior, okay? Again, it's a pro-social behavior. It's a helping, sharing, and cooperating behavior, period. It has empathy, and it has emotional sensitivity. And again, sensitivity gets demonized because people don't know how to balance strength with sensitivity. The trust in others is also part of it. That's another key aspect, right? It's literally, these are the big 5 personality traits. So pro-social behavior, the empathy and emotional sensitivity, as well as trust in others, as well as the tendency towards compliance or the willingness to comply in order to avoid conflict. And this is why people fail to understand the concept that conflict can actually be healthy when two people come to an actual understanding. When in actuality, if we are too agreeable, if we're too compliant, that could be because we're avoiding an argument. And I'll tell you right now, if you're in a marriage and you're constantly trying to avoid conflict and you're always complying, you are going to live a very unfulfilled life. You're going to be very unfulfilled. There's going to be a big void inside you because you're always giving, giving, giving. And some people will see giving as a superpower or a trait. I'm going to say if you're giving too much, you become the martyr. And if you become the martyr, then guess what? You really don't have any boundaries at all, and you're not exercising your strengths. So we have to be able to balance those assertiveness, that assertive nature, with the agreeableness that might exist. So it's first thing that we want to say. So if you want to understand that, hang on and you can actually get a feel for what we're going to talk about. And I just want to say hi. I want to say hi to everybody out there, everybody who's just watching. We're talking about agreeableness for those people that are too agreeable and are not using their actual boundaries. And that's my book on Amazon, The Beautiful Flaw, and that's my podcast, The Voices of Victory. So, first off, on this channel, this is a respectful channel. This is my second live respectful channel. That's one thing I'm going to say in terms of one of my rules. Number two, my vibe is my tribe. If you don't vibe, there's always another tribe. That's all I'm going to say about that. That this is all about sharing and educating and bringing knowledge to the forefront to the people who can actually benefit from it out in the world. So I just want to share that. But we're talking about agreeableness. When people are too agreeable, they fall into the traps of compliance. And if you're too compliant, if you're in a relationship and you're saying yes all the time just to avoid argument, then that means you're afraid of conflict. And if you're afraid of conflict, it's maybe because you haven't learned enough about conflict. Conflict can be extremely healthy when two people actually come to an understanding. When two people have an argument and it gets worked out, they both come to an understanding even though there was an actual fight. There's fights that can actually be unhealthy, but when you're agreeable, you might do that to have a quiet life. You know, it's kind of like anything to avoid a fight with the wife or a fight with the girlfriend, right? Or anything to avoid a fight with the husband or a fight with the boyfriend. Anything, you know, that's what agreeableness will do, is you'll avoid conflict, you'll avoid those sort of things. So what we want to understand is these behaviors, they show up in a variety of different ways. For one, charitable, yeah, to be agreeable could also be charitable. They can be very giving. Oh, let me help out, let me give, let me share, to be very charitable. And I'm not saying charitable is to be bad, but you have to have a sense of boundaries as like, hey, you know, I can't give it. There's something I can't give right now and I can't do it, right? Being able to say that, no. Volunteerism is another one where they volunteer. They might be more cooperative working in a team environment or a team setting. They could be less likely to engage in behaviors that are negative. You know, if they're agreeable, that doesn't always mean that they'll fall into negative behaviors. They may say, you know what, I don't feel comfortable doing that. Like eventually, if they do wind up falling into behaviors that are not good for them, such as like crime, they could wind up being the odd person out and having a big problem ahead of themselves, okay? There's a biological basis to agreeableness. When they're agreeable, guess what? It's linked to oxytocin sensitivity. Okay, and if you know, in terms of the chemicals in our body, we have, you know, dopamine, which is the first one, oxytocin, serotonin, and epinephrine. It spells the word DOSE, or dose, okay? That's how you remember those, and oxytocin is kind of that feel-good chemical there. Now, when it comes down to it, they actually say The psychologists say that agreeableness is 30% hereditary. 30% hereditary. Wow. Imagine that, right? So there are some downsides. If you're too agreeable, you're going to be increased vulnerability to exploitation. People are going to exploit you. You're not going to have a backbone. They're going to wipe their feet all over you, right? In relationships, there's usually a major imbalance. Okay, if you're too strong, chances are you're an asshole. And if you're too nice, chances are people will wipe their feet all over you. So to understand the principle and concept that relationships should really require both. That's love and strength, not one, not the other. Don't get it twisted. Okay, let's get it very clear that if you want to be in a relationship, it's going to require both. That's it. If you're falling on one side or falling on another, you got work to do. You got work to do to develop yourself. And if you choose not to, because you want to live by default means you run on your old patterns the way you always done things, then you really don't grow. You just stay put. You know, you just run through the same patterns all the time. And that's the thing, is people are living their lives by default. They're choosing to not do something. You got to remember, choosing to do something is a cause set in motion to change your life. Choosing to do nothing is still a cause set in motion. It's still a cause set in motion with that. So what do we do to counteract excessive agreeableness? When people are too agreeable, what do we do to do that? First of all, you got to clarify and set boundaries, period. That's how it's going down. You got to identify what your values are, what you value, and literally what those values are when it comes to guiding your decisions, what your actual decisions are. And those values could be in conflict with someone else's expectations. So it's going to be important for you to know what your values are and communicate, I value X, I do not value Y. And that's a boundary for me, that's not happening. Simple as that. That is being able to express it. Usually statements that begin with I. You know, I feel, you could try that, or I no longer value that, or I don't value that. Whatever the case may be, you got to speak up when it comes down to boundaries. You got to develop assertiveness skills. For all of you that don't know, I live in Massachusetts, but I'm from New York. And guess what? If you're from New York and you're walking down New York City and your body language gives off the vibe that you're an easy target, you're walking down the street looking at your phone, it's a one-way ticket to getting robbed or mugged, especially if you're in the Bronx, okay? In certain areas of the Bronx. Not that the Bronx is all bad, because there's plenty of good, loving people that come into the Bronx, okay? That being said, you could say that prey behavior creates predator approach. That if you walk around with your head down, unconfident body language, you are going to, sooner or later, a predator will spot your behavior. And they may even try to dominate you in some way, shape, or form. That becomes a whole different ball of wax. So you got to be able to understand that agreeableness needs to be coupled with boundaries. That's so important. You have to have that self-esteem, that confidence in who you are, carrying yourself. You know, being able to speak with a tone that has some strength and authority in it. Very important. Now, you have to strengthen that self-confidence, focus on your strengths and your accomplishments. When you are falling into people-pleasing, because that's another major issue, people fall into people-pleasing, you have to get away from that idea or that belief of I must always make other people happy. Because if you're always making other people happy in this world, then guess what? Your needs are sometimes going to fall to the wayside. You will fall into resentment. You'll become resentful of other people because you'll feel like they're taking advantage when in actuality, maybe you yourself didn't have any boundaries. So you see how that gets all skewed, and a lot of people misunderstand that. There could be a fear of conflict. You know, again, when you're agreeable, you avoid conflict. And if you avoid conflict, you're missing the point, because conflict could actually strengthen your relationship rather than destroy it. People that avoid conflicts in their relationship, and they're always avoiding that, sooner or later that resentment is going to build up. Sooner or later they're going to resent that other person, might even leave them. Might even say, you know what, I can't do this anymore, like I'm done, right? They don't have any sense of boundaries to draw the line and say, I'm willing to accept X, I'm not willing to accept Y. Last but not least, if you are a person that deals with agreeableness, it's probably good to seek the help of a psychologist, psychiatrist, counselor, someone who's going to actually support you. Agreeableness is a strength when assertiveness is part of that. Well, love and strength and confidence and assertiveness should all go together. They should all be one unit. But if it's unchecked, if you're very agreeable and it's very unchecked, that can undermine your well-being and undermine your goals and undermine your relationships. So that can be a big issue. When you integrate assertiveness training to be assertive, and you integrate that, you have boundaries, you set your boundaries, you focus on boundary setting, you reframe your beliefs, you start to look at your beliefs and realize where they need to be shifted. That's going to be a big deal, because it's to become more strategic. You can be agreeable, but you have to be strong and strategic. That's the bottom line to this show today. This is the second one. Now, if you have any questions, keep the questions productive and keep them respectful. Otherwise, of course, you will get banned. So if you have any questions, feel free to open up if you want to ask anything. Other than that, if not, I'll eventually close the show. Bueller, anyone? If you have a couple things to say it. Let's hear what you have to say. If you have a few things. Otherwise, I'll give it another minute, and then we'll close down the show from there. Bueller? Anyone? Right? All right. Well, on that note, we'll go ahead and shut down the show from here. Just remember that if you find yourself to be too agreeable, you want to identify your core values, the things that you actually value in this world. We're not talking about low value things. We're talking about high value things. Honesty is a value. Integrity is a value, right? Clarify your values. Identify your core values. Develop assertiveness skills. Challenge your negative thought patterns. And most of all, strengthen your self-esteem and confidence. And if you have to seek support, go ahead and do so. So that's pretty much it for this particular episode. This is live stream number 2. Take care. See you on the next one.